Hey everyone, and welcome back to Color Me Conway. If you've been following along, you know today we are talking about the finale of season 2 of Severance. There is so much to talk about, so let's get into it. Okay, the second that it was confirmed that this episode was gonna be 75 minutes, I was so excited to see what was gonna happen. Where do we even begin? I mean, I do have to say, just right up front, I thought this finale was amazing. They do such a good job with this show. I think I'm gonna do just a full video on the entire show, and I'd love to know what you all thought in the comments below. First, let's talk about Cobell. A couple things stood out to me in this episode, and I'd love to know if you guys are thinking the same or if you perceived things differently. So the episode begins with us going back to that cabin that the previous episode closed at. And there's this whole exchange between Mark's Innie and Audi about how Mark's Audi wants help in freeing Gemma from this Lumen prison that she's in, and how the Innie is feeling used by Mark's Audi and underappreciated and isn't willing to risk his life to save a woman that he doesn't know. It's a long back and forth. I think it's like the first 20 minutes of the episode. But what struck me as interesting is it is not Mark that ended up appealing to Mark. But it's Cobell that ends up convincing Mark's Innie to actually help. And there's a couple things that I thought was interesting about that. So first, I'd love to know what you all are thinking about her being the person that helps to get this plan off the ground. The fact that she exposes the truth to Mark's Innie about what the numbers mean and what he's been refining for the last 2 years at Lumen.
The MDR numbers from your console. They're a doorway into the mind of your Audi's wife, Gemma Scout.
Creating separate consciences. Creating separate consciences, we'll go with that, for Gemma. And Mark has this realization that he's completed 24 files. So now we know that Gemma has been severed 24 times up until Cold Harbor gets completed. And that, coupled with her saying that the 25th file is his end, he's no longer needed by the company, it will be his final day, regardless of if he helps his Audi or not, is I think what seals the message for Mark's Innie, and he's then willing to cooperate and help Gemma. There was another moment that stood out to me as well with Cobell at the cabin, where she says,
I care for you.
I don't know, feels a little bit odd to me. I see some people theorizing online that Mark could be Cobell's son. We know that she had a relationship with James Egan. We don't know the extent of that, but I think we can infer that it's possible that they had a sexual relationship. And James Egan mentions in the episode that he conceived multiple children trying to find Keir within them. And so it's very likely that he and Cobell got together and Cobell got pregnant, especially since she has such intimate knowledge of this birthing cabin. So I don't think that's out of the question, but it definitely makes you wonder what Cobell's true motivations are, because that's pretty much where we leave it with Cobell. We don't see her after they leave the cabin, and to me, we have not fleshed out Cobell's motivations. So why does she want this plan to take place? Why does she care? I'd love to know what you all are thinking in the comments below. It'll be so interesting. I can't imagine this show does not get a season 3, and it'll be very interesting to me to see what Cobell's role is in that new season, given where we left things with her, and of course just how the season ends, but specifically how we leave things with Cobell. Let's take a minute and talk about Jamie Egan. So a few things come to light in this episode, specifically around Jamie Egan. One, he shares with Helly that he hates his daughter Helena. Father of the Year. He also tells Helly that he fathered many children in search of finding Kier within them, because he used to see that within his daughter, and that spirit has left her. He also tells Helly that he sees Kier within her. So that leaves me thinking a couple of things. Do we think it's possible that he will prioritize the Helly consciousness over Helena, knowing that he, one, hates his daughter, and two, he sees the fire of Kier within Helly? That aside, we also see him witnessing Mark and Gemma's moment in the Cold Harbor room, where he has a single desk and computer where he's able to watch these tests that Gemma goes through. And it's clear that, the test did not go according to plan. So I wonder what will happen next and what he will do next, given Mark sort of jeopardizing the entire project. I'm super curious what you all are thinking will happen next with Jamie Egan. And on the topic of Helly versus Helena, please share your thoughts, share your theories in the comments below. Okay, next, let's talk about what do we think will end up happening to Gemma. Obviously, Mark's innie helps successfully get Mark's outie to the testing floor, and they end up getting Gemma into the stairwell, all according to plan. Where we have now a ton of question marks is Mark's outie never joined her in the stairwell so they could exit the building. Who was going to be waiting for them? I assume his sister. Do we think Cobell would have been there as well? I don't know. But we leave Gemma in what feels like a pretty vulnerable position. She is pleading with Mark's innie to come out of the building, of which he does not. And she's still in the stairwell. So if she doesn't choose to leave the building, it seems very likely that someone could find her in the stairwell, open up the door, and pull her back onto the severed floor, and then she would just revert back to her Miss Casey personality. So as much as Mark's innie and outie ended up coordinating to get Gemma off of the testing floor, it does not feel unreasonable that Gemma might not actually escape the building if she is convinced that she needs to go back for Mark and doesn't understand that she will revert to a severed consciousness. That keeps tripping me up. When she comes back into the building. So I'm super curious what people are thinking there. Obviously, there's a ton to talk about between just Helly and Mark, and we'll talk about that next. But on the topic of Gemma, do we think that she was kidnapped by Lumen and underwent this testing by force? Or do we think she voluntarily signed up? We don't get a ton of context there. None of that is clear. I would love to know what people are hypothesizing on that one. And then, do we think she'll leave the building? I mean, I don't think we can say with 100% certainty that she's going to get out of the building successfully. Okay, and now let's talk about Helly and Mark. So, as expected, Mark is super conflicted, Mark's innie, with helping his outie, knowing that it will be the end of him coming to work, seeing Helly on the severed floor, and continuing to build that relationship with Helly. Obviously, Cobell makes it clear that Mark's innie will not get to see Helly again regardless, but he's still grappling with the thought of that being accelerated by him and him seemingly sacrificing his own life and happiness for the happiness of his outie. Also, as expected, Helly is telling him to do this and saying, you might get a chance to live on the outside if your outie was telling the truth about reintegration, and I will not. I'm an Egan, and I will not get to see the light of day in the outside world. So don't hang around for me. If everything your outie said is true, today is the last time you're gonna see me anyways, so go get Gemma. And she ends up being the reason that he's able to come to terms with the fact that he's gonna do this. Fast forward, and Helly distracts Milchak, which, go for it, girl, and gives Mark a window to get to the export elevator to get down to the testing floor. Mark finds his way there. We see a very intense fight between Mark and Drummond and Lorne. Good for her. Mark would have been dead otherwise. And Mark gets to the elevator. He gets down, successfully gets Gemma, all the things. We just talked about that. They get back up, and there's this scene at the end where we're all just waiting to see, is Mark going to go through the door or is Mark going to stay in the building? And his hands are on the door, and then all of a sudden, Helly comes into the hallway and calls his name. Was anyone else thinking that that version of Helly was Helena? And they put the glass glow block on Helena to have her go find Mark and get him to stay in the building. Is that just me? Or is anyone else thinking that there's a chance that the person we saw in the hallway with Mark was actually Helena? Because Helly was convincing him to do this. And I think if it was Helly, she would have said something like, get out of here, or like encouraged him to go out the door. I could be completely off base, but part of me is really thinking that it was Helena that ended up being the person in the hall and getting Mark to stay in the building. But it was seemingly pretty easy for them to initiate the Glasgow block at the Ordbow and immediately have Helly and Helena switch places. So could it not been the same easy switch to get Helena back in the driver's seat and have her keep Mark in the building? It could be super off base, but that is like my top theory leaving the episode, is that it was Helena that got Mark to stay in the building. I would love to know if people agree or disagree with me on that one, but I wouldn't put it past the show to do that, especially since I'm still convinced that Mark has gotten Helena pregnant, and we'll see that storyline unfold in a future season if it gets one, when it gets one. But I'd love to know if anyone else was thinking that, because the more I thought about the end, the more I was like, it just does not feel like Helly wouldn't have been yelling at him to leave the building. So super interested to hear what you guys are thinking on that point as well. Obviously, there's so many more questions and open items, but those were the top things that stood out to me. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. This was my first go at reviewing a season episode by episode, so appreciate anyone out there who took the time to watch and listen in. Please smash the like button, consider subscribing, and share any show that you might want me to talk about in future videos. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next one.